Welcome to Empathy Stories, where we explore the power of human connection and the profound impact of compassion. Today's story will take you on an emotional journey of resilience, love, and the transformative bond between a lost boy and a determined officer who became his family. Let's dive in. Jason Turner had always found solace in the quiet moments after a long shift. Joe's Diner, with its worn red booths and the comforting aroma of coffee, was his sanctuary. It was a place where the weight of his badge felt lighter, where the soft clinking of plates and the low hum of conversation drowned out the harsher memories of his job. On this particular evening, Jason sat alone in the corner booth, savoring the warmth of his coffee and the familiar rhythm of life outside his precinct. The bell above the diner's door chimed softly, drawing his attention. He glanced up, more out of habit than curiosity, and saw a boy standing hesitantly in the doorway. The child couldn't have been more than 8 or 9. His sneakers were scuffed, and his oversized hoodie looked like it had seen better days. But it wasn't the boy's appearance that caught Jason's attention. It was his eyes, wide, frightened, and darting around the room as though searching for a safe place. The boy's gaze landed on Jason's uniform, and something shifted. Fear gave way to a fragile thread of hope. With slow, deliberate steps, the boy crossed the room, his small hands trembling at his sides. Jason set his coffee down and leaned forward, his instinct as a cop kicking in. "Hey there, buddy," Jason said softly, his voice low and steady. "You look like you've had a tough day. What's your name?" The boy glanced over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to burst in after him. When he turned back, his lips quivered, and his words came out in a whisper. "Help me." 2 words, but they hit Jason like a freight train. The child's voice was so quiet it was almost drowned out by the ambient noise of the diner. But Jason heard it clear as day. He straightened in his seat, every muscle in his body alert. There was a desperation in the boy's tone, a plea that went beyond the surface. Jason slid out of the booth and knelt down to meet the boy's eyes. "You're safe here," he said gently. "Can you tell me what's wrong?" The boy hesitated, glancing again over his shoulder. Finally, he whispered, "I ran away from a bad place. There are other kids there too." Jason's stomach twisted. The boy wasn't just frightened, he was in danger. And from the sound of it, so were others. "What's your name?" Jason asked, his tone steady but soft. "Caleb," the boy replied, his voice shaking. "All right, Caleb. I'm Officer Turner, but you can call me Jason. Can you tell me about this place you ran from?" Caleb took a shaky breath. "It's a house with a red door," he said. "They keep kids there in the basement. I found a way out through a window." Jason's mind raced. This was more than a runaway. This was a child trafficking operation. He reached for his radio, careful to keep his movements slow so as not to alarm Caleb. "Dispatch. This is Officer Turner. I need backup at Joe's Diner on Main Street. Possible child endangerment situation. Keep it discreet." "Copy that. Officer Turner. Backup is on the way," came the dispatcher's calm response. Jason turned his attention back to Caleb, whose small hands were gripping the edge of the table tightly. "You did the right thing coming here, Caleb," Jason said, his voice warm and reassuring. "You're very brave." Caleb nodded, but his shoulders were still trembling. Jason reached across the table and placed a comforting hand over Caleb's. "We're going to help you and the other kids," he promised. "But I need you to tell me everything you remember about the house." Caleb's brow furrowed in concentration. "It's at the end of a long driveway," he said. "There are lots of trees around it, and there's a man with a scar on his face. He's mean." Jason committed every detail to memory, his pulse quickening as the pieces of the puzzle began to form. The bell above the diner door chimed again, and 2 officers entered, scanning the room until their eyes landed on Jason and Caleb. Jason gave Caleb's hand a gentle squeeze. "It's okay, buddy. These are my friends. They're here to help." Caleb's eyes darted nervously to the officers, but he didn't move. Trust was a fragile thing, and Jason knew he had to tread carefully. After briefing his colleagues, Jason knelt down beside Caleb again. "We're going to find that house and help those kids. Can you show us the way?" Caleb nodded, his fear giving way to a quiet determination. "I can show you," he said. In the cover of night, Jason and his team followed Caleb's directions, their cars moving slowly down the winding roads outside of town. The boy sat in the passenger seat of Jason's cruiser, clutching a stuffed animal an officer had given him for comfort. "That's it," Caleb whispered when they approached a tree-lined driveway. The house with the red door. Jason parked out of sight and radioed for the team to move in quietly. Before stepping out, he turned to Caleb. "You've been incredibly brave. Caleb, stay here with Officer Johnson. Okay? We'll take it from here." Caleb nodded, though his hands trembled as he clutched the stuffed animal tighter. "Be careful," he whispered. Jason gave him a reassuring nod before stepping out into the cool night air. As he and the team approached the house, his heart pounded. This wasn't just about rescuing children anymore. It was about keeping a promise to Caleb and to himself that no child would endure this nightmare for a moment longer. The raid on the house with the red door was swift and decisive. Jason led his team through the dimly lit corridors, his heart racing with equal parts adrenaline and dread. Every room they entered revealed more of the dark reality Caleb had fled. Small, cramped spaces littered with broken toys and tattered blankets. In the basement, they found 6 other children, their eyes wide with fear, huddled together as if the walls could somehow protect them. "It's okay," Jason said softly, kneeling down to their level and holstering his weapon. "You're safe now. We're here to help." Some of the children cried, while others stared at Jason in silent disbelief. One little girl reached out, and Jason gently took her hand, feeling the weight of her fragile trust. As the other officers secured the house and its captors, Jason focused on the children, helping them upstairs one by one. Outside, paramedics waited to assess their condition. When Jason stepped into the cool night air, Caleb was waiting near the police car, his small frame silhouetted against the flashing lights. The moment their eyes met, Caleb ran toward him, relief and worry written all over his face. "Are they okay?" Caleb asked, his voice trembling. Jason knelt and placed a steadying hand on the boy's shoulder. "They're safe now. Thanks to you," he said. "You did an incredible thing." "Caleb," the boy's face lit up for a brief moment before a shadow of doubt crept back in. "What happens to them now? What happens to me?" Jason's heart ached at the question. He had seen this story play out too many times. A child rescued from danger only to be thrown into an unfamiliar system that didn't always provide the care they needed. He made a silent promise to himself that this time would be different. "You'll be taken somewhere safe," Jason said, though the words felt hollow even to his own ears. "We'll figure this out together." "Okay." Caleb nodded hesitantly, and Jason could see the weight of the boy's experiences in his tired eyes. He wished he could offer more than reassurances, but in that moment, it was all he had. Back at the station, Jason stayed by Caleb's side as officers and social workers worked through the necessary formalities. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed too harsh, casting stark shadows across Caleb's face. Jason noticed how the boy's shoulders tensed every time a stranger approached or asked him a question. "Hey," Jason said gently, pulling a chair closer to Caleb. "You doing okay?" Caleb shook his head. "I don't have anyone," he whispered. "No family. No home." Jason felt a lump rise in his throat. He thought of his own childhood, bouncing between foster homes after losing his parents in a car accident. He recognized the look in Caleb's eyes, the same mixture of fear and longing he'd carried for years. "You have me," Jason said, the words escaping before he could think twice. "For now, at least. We'll take it one step at a time." Caleb looked at him, searching his face for any hint of insincerity. Finding none, he nodded, his small fingers clutching the edge of his chair. That night, Jason took Caleb to a temporary safe house. It was a modest, 2-story building managed by a kind woman named Mrs. Reynolds, who greeted them with a warm smile and an offer of cookies. But as they stepped inside, Jason could feel Caleb's hesitation. The boy's eyes scanned every corner of the house, as though memorizing an escape route. I'll come by tomorrow, Jason said as he knelt to Caleb's level. To check on you? Is that okay? Caleb hesitated, then nodded. Promise. I promise, Jason replied, holding the boy's gaze. The drive home was quiet, but Jason's thoughts were anything but. His mind raced with memories of his own time in foster care, the loneliness, the uncertainty, the constant hope that the next home might be the one where he could finally stay. He couldn't let Caleb go through that, not if he could help it. The next day, Jason kept his promise. He arrived at the safe house with a small gift, a book about space exploration. Thought you might like this, he said as he handed it to Caleb. The boy's eyes lit up, and for a moment, Jason saw a glimpse of the childhood innocence Caleb should have been able to hold on to. Thanks, Caleb said, running his fingers over the glossy cover. They sat together at the kitchen table as Caleb flipped through the pages, his questions about planets and astronauts slowly replacing the silence that had lingered between them. Mrs. Reynolds watched from a distance, her expression softening. You're good with him, she said later as Jason prepared to leave. He trusts you. Jason nodded, but the weight of that trust was not lost on him. He had started looking into Caleb's past, combing through records and files to piece together the boy's story. What he found only deepened his resolve to protect Caleb. The system had failed him before, moving him from one foster home to another with no real stability. Jason knew what that felt like, and he wouldn't let it happen again. Over the next few weeks, Jason visited Caleb regularly, each visit strengthening the bond between them. They talked about everything from school to Caleb's favorite movies. And slowly, the boy began to open up. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the safe house, Caleb asked, "Why do you keep coming back?" Jason paused, caught off guard by the question. "Because I care about you," he said finally. "And because I've been where you are. I know what it's like to feel alone." Caleb looked at him, his small face filled with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Did you ever find a family?" Jason smiled faintly. "Not in the way I thought I would, but maybe family finds you when you least expect it." Caleb seemed to consider this, a flicker of hope crossing his face. Jason watched him, a sense of purpose settling over him. He didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was clear. Caleb had become more than just a case. He was part of Jason's life now, and Jason was determined to give him the stability and love he deserved. The quiet rhythm of their days together had transformed Caleb in ways Jason could hardly believe. The shy, guarded boy who had hesitated to trust now greeted Jason with an enthusiastic smile every time he arrived at the safe house. Their bond had deepened over shared meals, late-night talks, and Jason's relentless presence. Caleb began to laugh more freely, and the dark shadows under his eyes started to fade. But with every visit, Jason felt the pull of something deeper. He wasn't just a police officer checking in on a child in need. Caleb had become more than a responsibility. He had become a part of Jason's life, filling a space Jason hadn't even realized was empty. One evening, after an exhausting day at work, Jason arrived at the safe house with pizza and a board game tucked under his arm. Caleb ran to the door to greet him, his face lighting up as if Jason's presence alone made the world a little safer. "You're here," Caleb said, his voice bubbling with excitement. "Of course," Jason said with a grin. "Told you I'd be." As they settled at the table, Caleb opened the game box with eager hands, his excitement contagious. They laughed and played until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. When Caleb paused to take a sip of his soda, he looked up at Jason and said, "You're the only one who keeps their promises." Jason froze, his chest tightening at the quiet, unfiltered truth in Caleb's words. "Well," he said softly, "you deserve that. Everyone deserves someone they can count on." Caleb nodded, his eyes serious. "Do you think maybe you could always be here?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken fears and hopes. Jason reached out, placing a steady hand on Caleb's shoulder. "I've been thinking about that too," he admitted, "and I want to talk to you about something important." Caleb's eyes widened, a mixture of anticipation and apprehension flickering across his face. I've been looking into becoming your guardian, Jason said carefully. It's a big step, and it won't be easy, but I want to give you a real home, a place where you know you belong. Caleb blinked, his face unreadable for a moment. Then, as the words sank in, his expression softened, and his lips curled into a hesitant but hopeful smile. You mean I'd live with you? For real? For real, Jason said, his voice steady. If that's what you want too. The boy nodded so quickly Jason thought his head might fall off. Yes, I want that. Jason let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Relief and joy washed over him in equal measure. Then let's make it happen, he said, ruffling Caleb's hair. Together. The process was anything but simple. Jason spent hours filling out forms, meeting with social workers, and preparing his home for inspections. Each step brought a new set of challenges, but Jason faced them with unwavering determination. Caleb's smile, his laughter, and the trust they had built gave Jason the strength to keep going. One evening, as Jason tucked Caleb into bed, the boy hesitated before speaking. What if they don't let you keep me? He asked, his voice small and trembling. Jason knelt beside him, meeting his gaze. Hey, don't think like that, he said gently. We're doing everything we can to make this work. No matter what happens, I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me. Kid. Caleb's face relaxed into a small smile. Good, he said, curling under the blanket. Because I like being stuck with you. The day the court finalized Jason's guardianship was one of quiet celebration. Jason picked Caleb up from the safe house and drove him to the modest apartment they would now call home together. Caleb's wide eyes took in every detail, the cozy living room, the small but bright kitchen, and the bedroom Jason had carefully decorated with posters of Caleb's favorite superheroes. This is all for me? Caleb asked, his voice filled with wonder. It's your home now, Jason said. Our home. Caleb ran to the bed, jumping onto the mattress and hugging the pillows as if they were treasures. Jason watched him, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. Later that evening, they sat on the couch eating takeout and watching cartoons. Caleb leaned against Jason's side, his small frame warm and solid. Jason, Caleb asked quietly, his voice barely audible over the TV. Yeah, buddy, can I call you Dad? Caleb's words hung in the air, tentative and hopeful. Jason felt his throat tighten. He hadn't expected the question, but as he looked down at Caleb, he realized how much he wanted to hear that word. I'd be honored, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Caleb's face lit up, and he wrapped his arms around Jason. Thanks, Dad, he whispered. Jason held him close, feeling an overwhelming sense of love and responsibility. He had spent his whole life thinking he didn't need anyone, but Caleb had shown him otherwise. This wasn't just about giving Caleb a family. It was about becoming one. In the weeks that followed, their bond grew even stronger. They built new routines together. Saturday morning pancakes, basketball games at the park, and bedtime stories every night. Jason found himself looking forward to these moments, cherishing the simple joys they brought. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Caleb turned to Jason and said, I'm glad I found you. Jason smiled, ruffling Caleb's hair. Me too, kid, me too. The road that brought them together had been long and difficult, but as they sat side by side, watching the sky fade to twilight, both of them knew they had found what they had been searching for all along, a family. Thank you for watching this heartfelt journey on Empathy Stories. Caleb and Jason's story reminds us of the incredible strength found in love, trust, and second chances. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories that inspire kindness and hope. Together, let's celebrate the beauty of empathy and the connections that change lives. See you in the next video.